Okay, then we start then.
We shall.
Yeah, okay. Hey everyone, it's we again. I am Daniel Bistrom. I'm sitting here together with Chris Doyle. And we are about to make another Our Future talk. This time we have landed in North Province of Rwanda. It's really something that we can just fly around like this and almost like Google Earth, just zooming in on different places. But not only that, we will actually zoom in that far. So we'll meet the people and actually get into the soul of the community. And this is a very special occasion today. We will be on an Igitaramo, real Rwandan Igitaramo, a digital one. And we will walk us through this program together with Greg that we will present soon. And then we will get to know the local culture and have a really interesting dialogue together with an invited panel for today. Will you say something?
Excellent. Yes. And so we have the good fortune to be hosted by our local champion, Greg Bakunzi, whom I've known for a couple of years and his incredible work in Rwanda. And one of the things over the last couple of years I've learned about Greg and his work, it's centered around societal development. All of the work that Red Rocks Rwanda and Red Rocks initiatives has been centered on has brought forward so many community matters. I mean, he's involved in agritourism projects, conservation research, livestock programs, agriculture programs, botanical gardens, biodegradable, new innovative new products, skills development, arts and culture programs. The list is plenty. And it's about a holistic view of bettering communities. And oh, by the way, tourism can benefit at the same time. And so I've been monitoring him personally for a long time. And when we started the Our Future program, I was thinking, boy, we could all learn a great deal from Greg and his community members. And so, Greg, thanks for being a mentor on community-based tourism development. I'm going to hand it to you just now, and you'll help warm us up here. So off to you, Greg.
Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks so much, Daniel, for making this happen. We are so, I would like to welcome everybody here, and we are so excited to really present what we have been doing here in Rwanda. And I would like to mention that Gitaramo used to, it's a Rwandan name which was used by the local people. Even the king himself would really join to make the event, to enjoy the event where everyone can show the talents and what they know and what they can do in their daily life. So for this evening, we are happy to show the Gitaramo, and I have to say that Daniel and Chris, you are the king of this event. So let's get the event start by welcoming everybody so that you see how a Gitaramo used to be. As you can see, we have got some local drums with different local instruments from drums. We have got some people who are doing the waving. Normally in our culture, when we are doing this kind of event, we have a kind of like a banana beer in a sort of a calabash, and people are tasting it, playing umuduli, inanga. So you can see that everybody is really ready to grace the event that is going to be taking place this evening with different instruments. So let me welcome on the dance as we open up our event, which is taking place very soon. So I would like to make a very quick introduction about the song they were singing. This song they were singing is in a Rwandan culture, showing that where can you get this kind of the culture? As you can see, every country has got its own culture. So this is a different one. They are so proud of their culture. They are so passionate about their culture. And that's why they are saying, where can you get this kind of culture? So that's a sign that they are so really proud about their culture. So they're gonna come up with another quick song very soon. With a quick introduction of the song that has been really going on, it's like this kind of culture is really needed, and totally from how they are benefiting from the tourism. It's this kind of culture that is really needed. As every culture is, as I have said, that every culture is quite different. You go to Congo, you find a different culture. You go to Kenya, you find a different culture. So it's they are using their own culture to see how can they benefit from what we are doing. So that's the song they were really singing right now. So without wasting too much time, we are going to go to the actual event. Definitely, we're going to be having the closing ceremony. So they are not going anywhere. They're going to be here. But for the meantime, let's jump on the table and we go into the full event of the day. Red Rocks Initiative is an initiative that came from us when we were from the community, from I myself, who have been in the industry for a long time, trying to see how can community conservation and tourism really benefit the local communities that resides along the protected areas. After really seeing the success from this, we have also started moving to other parts. We started this in the northern part of Rwanda, where we are right now. So we have to say this is the backbone of the tourism industry of Rwanda, where even investors and everybody, like Praveen, when he came here, he came straight away to here. He knew that this was the Rwandan destination of ecotourism. We have to even brand it as an ecotourism destination of Rwanda. And that's why we are sitting this evening, broadcasting all this event and also trying to show what have we been going through and what kind of initiatives that we have really initiated from art, not from art to skills development to cultural preservation. Imagine who, after seeing how these were really dancing, it shows that they are proud, they are passionate about the culture, and they are happy to share this with other people from around the world. We have come up with different community initiatives, and with all these community initiatives, we wanted to make sure that we share this with other people, not only just like having it with us, and also try to build a strong partnership with other organizations or private people who are also interested in this kind of initiative that we are running in our region, as we also try to extend it to other people. Imagine if we create a cultural exchange programs with people from Sweden, with people from US, with people from Congo. This could be like a huge a community tourism event that can even accelerate and bring the whole Africa on the world map as an ecotourism, as an cultural tourism exchange program. I would like really to thank Chris Daniel. I have known Chris for a couple of years. I would really like to thank you for bringing us, showing this event on this evening right away from here. It's an event that we were not even expecting. Even our community who are sitting here, they are really so passionate and excited to see that this is something that is being screened around the whole world while we are sitting at home. I know the COVID has teaching us a lot, even though we still have a lot to learn, but at least we have the startup. So thanks so much for really pulling us from here and also bringing some open-minded people who are passionate about this, who have been seeing the journey of the Rwandan tourism along the way from 1994 up to now. I think we have walked a long distance, but we are not yet there. We still have a long way to go, but let us really try to collaborate and do a lot of the partnership to see how we can accelerate our initiatives. Thank you.
Greg, thank you for that. What a wonderful opening. I want to come back, Greg, to something you said. You're extending thanks, which I appreciate, but I'd actually like to kind of bounce that right back to you, because you've opened up my eyes, and I know the eyes of many people, to really how things should be done. And as you know, I was trying to work with the Rwandan Development Board and to try to get some movement and action. And you had pushed me back a bit and you said, actually, Chris, let's not wait for anybody. Let's create our own action. Let's start moving. And so that's what resulted in this. And I would just share that thanks with you. This is just a wonderful way to showcase a destination, and you're inviting us into your home. And it's just a gift for all of us. So thank you for that. I would like to now just do a quick introduction to Praveen Maman, a longtime friend and colleague. And, you know, I haven't said this to you, Praveen, but I view you as one of my top mentors on many different levels. Praveen has been there. I was involved with a global organization in tourism. Praveen has always been there, always present, always offering guidance. A conservationist, a philanthropist, deeply involved in policy, deeply involved in the private sector, in the public sector. And of course, most of you in Rwanda are familiar with him for his work in the Virunga region. Praveen, you know, one of the things I observe about you over the years is just the depth of your understanding of the bigger picture. And that's why we invited you to come and maybe offer a bit of reflection on the historical context of tourism for Rwanda, the present state, and kind of some vision on the future. I know we don't have a great deal of time, but maybe for the next 10 minutes or so, you can offer that summary for all of the audience here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for all of you who've been helping organize this amazing Igitiramu event. I don't know where to start. It's a long journey that I have with both of you, with this region, with the sort of things that particularly Greg has been doing on the ground. So thank you for asking me to share what I've been trying to do and what I believe Greg has been doing in parallel, and how we try and build on this. Well, I've known both of you in different ways for 15 years. Greg is very modest. What he doesn't tell you is that he grew up in a refugee camp in Uganda. And one day, after the war ended in Rwanda in 1994, some years after that, I forget exactly the date, I think around 2000, if I'm right, or was it earlier, Greg? Greg decided he'd go home, and he walked from this refugee camp where he'd grown up back to his home country. And of course, that's around the time that I started working also in Uganda and then in Rwanda from 1997 onwards. And we all lived through a phase that was really quite upsetting, quite demoralizing, quite worrying for all of us, because with the Rwandese genocide and all the historical events that went around it, basically the whole Great Lakes area went into a huge conflict. And we had the Congo War, the first Congo War, and the second Congo War. And somehow, for different reasons, Greg and I had parallel journeys in trying to make stuff happen in this complicated area where Africa seemed to have exploded. At the same time, I met Chris Doyle in Seattle in, I think, 2006 at the Adventure Travel Trade Association. And these two are quite important poles in, I think, how we all need to think about tourism. So on the one hand, building bridges with other partners in the area, like Greg and I were doing different things. Greg walked up to this lodge I was building in 2004 called Virunga Lodge. And he just walked up the hill one day and said, wow, this is amazing. What are you doing? And then he told me about what he was doing. And from that time, we've had a very strong shared bond. And then on an international scale, I developed an equally strong bond with Doyle, as he's called in that industry, so to speak, of how to connect these forgotten areas of this world, these fragile areas of the world, where sometimes very deep and symbolic stuff happens, which affects us all and we should all know about. So these two poles have been very important. And this journey that you've organized today for Northern Rwanda is especially important because this tiny area around the Virungas in Rwanda is a microcosm of what happens in the world in terms of society, as Greg calls it, in terms of community development, conservation, and tourism. And it's a tiny part of the world, but it is one of the single most important parts of the world for tourism, for conservation, and communities. So the lessons inside the national park and around are valid for the world. And that is what is so exciting and interesting about it. First of all, of course, it came out of conflict, and that was an issue. But the gorillas were safe, the park functioned. The government of Rwanda from the beginning has had a very strong vision and a mission to look after its conservation assets and its wildlife and to make sure that it goes somewhere. And they have really changed the face of conservation and tourism in the 15 or so years that Greg and Chris and I know each other, and certainly in the 20 years that we have been in Rwanda. I myself actually are connected to the Virungas for even longer. I first went walking in the Virungas when I was 12 with my father in the 1960s, which tells you a bit too much about my age. But the link is particularly strong, both in terms of timing and what it taught me, because that's exactly the year that Diane Fossey was beginning to work in the region. And her whole love and work with the gorillas, as you know, has become a seminal work in the world on how to look after a very threatened species and how to protect it going forward. So these long connections have made me realize a number of things which I'd like to talk about. So in 1997, when Volcano Safaris was set up, I first set it up in Uganda and then moved across to Rwanda. And this was because of these early memories that I had in childhood of this very dramatic and special area. And as I said at the beginning, it was very challenging because things were inevitably not working. We were still in a conflict period and things were really rather challenging, especially for the local people, many of whom had been refugees who were coming back home from the Congo, back to Rwanda or back to Uganda. And it was quite a challenging moment and philosophical moment to ask oneself the question, should one be thinking of setting up tourism when you saw vast amounts of humanity trying just to survive and trying to have enough to eat? And at the time, it was very complex to think about this. And in the end, I thought, well, no, we should start tourism because one day it will help the redevelopment of this area and connect it to the world once the conflict was over. And I'm happy to say that over the last 20 years that we've been there, that in effect, we've been on the journey with the country of Rwanda, with its people, in this whole opening up, in this whole settling down. And it's been a very, very dramatic improvement from the times when both Greg and I think it's fair to say, when we went into the forests where the gorillas were, we'd often have to run away because there were so many militias and so many odd people hanging around. To today, where Rwanda is one of the safest countries in the world, where the northern zone, northern area of Rwanda, as I said before, is so important and so seminal for the development of tourism and how it links to society. And the whole evolution of the conservation of the national park, of the development of high quality tourism, of the money it brings into the area. Having first started, as I said, in 2000, in 2004, I became the first person in effect in the world to build a lodge in Rwanda after the war, Virunga Lodge near Parc National des Volcans. And somehow I just did it. I didn't kind of think through all the consequences, but it started working and clients started coming as the country stabilized. And in these 15 years, the work of conservation organizations to help stabilize the conservation aspects and develop them has been very strong. Government policy has been very impressive. The private sector, whether just a person in Musanze town trying to borrow as many dollars he or she could to develop a small tourism facility, to now international companies that have come in to build very high-class tourism establishments, has been really impressive. And if you'd asked me if this was going to happen 20 years ago, I would have thought it was impossible and unthinkable. So the journey has been really great. And from those early years, that when people like Greg and I had to, in effect, set up everything, build up teams of people, find staff to train, because obviously many of the skilled staff had died or were no longer in the country, try and attract clients, try and put in an international supply chain, build a reputation, and somehow start an enterprise has been challenging. And we've all faced many journeys. But from the time in 2000, when basically there was one functioning hotel in the town of Musanze, the Mahabura Hotel, to today a town that has maybe 50 enterprises of tourism and conservation and community tourism around, I think is a very impressive journey. And I think each of us has also tried to do different things along that journey. At Virunga, for example, we have our own community projects, different to the ones Greg has done, but also remembering all the time that the people around us are not rich. They are not interested in gorillas for the sake of it. They are not tourists. They are doing their best to survive in a very difficult environment with $2 a day income in some cases. So our projects have, in some ways, looked at things that they need, like sharing electricity with our neighbors, helping safeguard a water source, rebuilding a local school. Our clients give sheep and water tanks to villagers. Again, sheep to help with manure for agriculture, and water tanks, obviously, to make sure that they have enough water during the dry season. We have a loan scheme for women and have set up a clothing and a handicrafts program, and also solar power. And all these things at different levels are basically reminding ourselves of 2 or 3 different things. One is that tourism and conservation and the communities are part of the same, if you like, ecosystem, the same connection. And they must all work really well together for this model to work. Because in my view, gorillas would not have survived without tourism. It's only by monetizing them that has really helped safeguard their future, safeguard their habitat, and connect them to the world. At the same time, if you have too much tourism, that can also have a very negative impact on the gorillas. It can, of course, cause disease, which is especially important in today's world of COVID. It can overstress them. But if you don't have this tourism link, why would local people want to preserve gorillas? They have too many other things to do, like survive. They're not going to the forest to pay $1,500 to see a gorilla. These communities need land, they need crops, they need money. So we need to make sure that the money that's coming from tourism, from conservation, is going in a big part to those communities. And that the Rwandese government, of course, has different measures in place to make sure that there's a revenue sharing scheme of 10% from gorilla permits. There are other projects being put in place. And then it's up to all of us, whether conservation organizations or tourism organizations, to do our part. And then I think the model begins to work well. And then there's a lot to share, just like Greg is showing from his Red Rocks place today, that there's a whole spirit of hospitality and history and cultural values embedded in the Great Lakes, embedded in Rwanda. And this is something we share with the world and be proud of it. And that's something that I think guests also appreciate and learn a lot from. Just to wrap up some of the things that I was saying then, to bring them together, there are 3 points that I think are important from my journey for the last 20 years. Having kind of started being the pioneers of ecotourism for gorillas and chimps, this is what I've learned. One is that the link between conservation and communities and tourism is critical, and making sure that that's optimized for the benefit of all 3 partners. Conservation has to be part of the economic mainstream. It has, in my opinion, it has to pay. This might be controversial, but that's what I believe. And that the reason for that is that so that wilderness produces a return for the economy, for society, especially the poor people who live around the protected area of Parc National des Volcans around northern Rwanda. This may be controversial, but I think it's essential that we look at this in an economic way. And in this, the private sector has an essential part to play in the connection between conservation and the economy. The second is that sensitive and controlled tourism is critical for great apes to survive. If you don't have tourism, I don't think they'll survive. If you have too much, they will also not survive. And that's especially true in the age of COVID, where the government of Rwanda and other regional governments have introduced specific protocols. So I would urge everybody who's considering going tracking, local people in the area, all of us as stakeholders, to make sure that we follow the protocols. If we go anywhere near the gorilla park, we sanitize, we keep our distance, we don't go into the park if we are ill. And as stakeholders in this area, we must make sure that our guests follow this. The third is that the focus of conservation and tourism has to be the communities, exactly in the sort of way that Greg's project has been doing for years, and we in parallel and other companies do. And that is, I think, critical, because ultimately it's what will keep all three things in balance. And really, as part of this story, we must make sure that people are treated with respect so that they become the guardians of the ecosystem and the wildernesses of the world. And rather than marginalizing them or ignoring them, they must become the front line for this. This is especially true in the 21st century. Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent, as we know, and Rwanda particularly is a representation of that post the Civil War, where the number of people, the population is increasing dramatically, where their consumption patterns are increasing as well. And they are part of this huge wave sweeping Africa, where more and more cities are being created. And in the next 20 years, we'll have 20 new cities of 20 million people each. But it's not only about cities, it's people living in rural areas who are also living in an urban way with urban demands of urban patterns of consumption. So specifically for Northern Rwanda, I would say this, that as we've heard from Greg right at the beginning, it's central to Rwandese tourism. And as I tried to say, it's central as a model area for the whole world. The Rwandese Gorilla Park and the Ugandan and Congolese gorilla parks together with Windy are 700 square kilometers. It's a tiny part of the world. If you put that in context, Serengeti in Tanzania is 30,000 square kilometers, and Yellowstone in America is 70,000 square kilometers. So the pressure inside the park with the gorillas that live there, 1,000 gorillas in all the 4 parks that exist in this tiny habitat are already big. So protocols are very important, as I said, to make sure the gorillas survive. But equally outside the park, in the Musanze Valley, in and around Musanze in northern Rwanda, we need to make sure that the population around is separated from the gorillas, from the habitat, that there is a buffer zone, which exists, of course, but that is protected. I know the government of Rwanda is looking at potentially increasing that buffer zone and potentially increasing the size of the park so that there is a greater habitat for the gorillas. And at the same time, we need to control the amount of tourists that visit the park, as is done today. It's about 120 people that can go in. We need to limit the amount of tourism development around the national park, and also human development, and also make sure the sanitation, the hygiene and contact of people with gorillas is limited. So I think I'd sum up and say that I hope this has been helpful to look at the wider context and the history of what's happened in this area. And I hope with the great vision of the government and all of us stakeholders working together, that the benefits of this area and its future will be even better rather than become more threatened. Thank you very much.
Praveen, thank you for that super articulate overview. And just a thanks, just from a human perspective, to the work that you and Greg have been doing on behalf of Rwanda, but it's more than that. It's like a project for humanity that, you know, that's why we're focusing the lens here now on it. And the fortunate part of this discussion, which is going to begin here, Daniel will lead us through that, is you're sharing the real-time, real-world challenges from a single pinpoint, if you will, on the planet. And now you've got here on this call some outsiders, if you will, who are going to be able to reflect on some of what we've just heard. We're in London, we're in Bulgaria, we're in Denmark, we're in Sweden, etc., all over, in South Africa, all over the world, tens of thousands of miles away. And now we've just gotten a window into your realities in Rwanda. And like I said earlier, it's a gift. So Daniel, for the dialogue portion of this, how about you describe what it is we're doing, how we're going to do it, and
yeah. Hey, everyone again. I mean, this experience with Future is so fantastic. Welcome everyone to this broadcast. Again, my name is Daniel Bistrom, and I want each of you that is on the panel here now also to be presenting yourself. And I will give each and every one just 30 seconds. Yeah, will you start?
Sure. Chris Doyle. I'm up here in Sweden with Daniel right now. And in my background and history in tourism and everything I've done, I've often been referred to as the dreamer, because I just don't really ever see limits on the potential of humans. So I focus on the stuff that people say can't be done, but I always think it can be done. That's me.
And now in this broadcast, we have different titles, and he's the dreamer of the team here. I would go further, and since Bård, that was supposed to be with us here today, he cannot be the grandfather, but luckily enough, we have another grandfather in the show that you have heard already. Praveen, can you just tell a little bit about yourself?
I haven't quite made it to being a grandfather, but I've made it to being a very old man. So maybe one day I'll be a grandfather as well. Well, I hope people have heard me speak. My name is Praveen Momin. I'm founder of Volcano Safaris. We've been working in the region of the gorillas and the chimps since 1997, and in Rwanda since 2000. And I suppose I'm a bit like Chris. I'm also a dreamer, but I also try and temper that with trying to make things happen in a real and a practical and a sustainable way.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Then over to Paka.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pagamile Hlazo. I go by Paka, and I'm the founder of Zulu Nomad. I'm based in South Africa. Zulu Nomad, our core purpose is to be an enabler of tourism capacity and enterprise development at scale on the African continent. My role within the team is that of change architect. And I think, there's so much really great work that has been done in Rwanda, as we can see today, but on the African continent in general, as far as tourism over the years. But again, there's just so much potential to do so much more. And so mine is to challenge where we are and to really see what can be done to take us to the next level.
Excellent.
Thanks. Then over to the other side of the bridge here, where we meet Signe, the nerd.
Indeed, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Signe Jongersen. I'm based here in Copenhagen. I'm the co-founder of Group Now, an innovation and strategic strategy agency coming out of Denmark, but working pretty much all over with tourism and destinations at its core. And I am the destination nerd, and in many ways, it's a comment to the fact that I think we should be talking less about destinations and more about communities. I have a background as well in wonderful Copenhagen, so the DMO, the Destination Management Marketing Organization of Copenhagen. So I do have a passion for destinations, but the real passion is how do we make tourism a positive resource to local communities and bigger and more agendas. Or sorry.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
And who's next? Milena, should we start with Milena?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Milena. On this team, I wear the shoes of the creative driver. And my passion is in imagining unconventional and smart solutions that are based on what we know about human behavior and human psychology. And of course, I'm interested in solutions that not only help make tourism better for the people, businesses, and places, but also make it a force for the betterment of our society and humanities at large.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And also, Christine, the nature lover and technical genius.
Now probably, and I hope that you will just, get rid of me from the technical part.
No. Wait, so you cannot get away so easy.
No, yeah. My role in this is to get focus on the local nature part of what we are doing, and maybe thinking about the balance between the local sustainability and so on. I work with Iceland tourism, but Iceland tourism is no different from other tourism in the world. We are focusing on getting people to enjoy and be travelers and connect to the local communities and the culture of the country. So I think that we can learn a lot from other parts in the world, and hopefully we can also share some good practices.
Excellent. And that reminds me just quickly of what Greg was talking about, because in the backdrop, we have been talking about exchange programs where we can do more of this. So it's pretty exciting that continues to pop up as a thing.
Yeah. Yes, briefly, since you talked about Greg, I think it would be nice if you, Greg, again, just tell everyone again who you are, but only like 30 seconds. How would you pitch yourself in 30 seconds? Who are you?
Thanks very much. Thanks, Praveen. Thanks, Chris. I really liked, first of all, I'm the dream as well, because I went into this tourism back in 2000 as Praveen was coming in. And I started with the co-founder of Amahoro Tours, and I started coming up with lots of initiatives and ideas. When I was on my way going on, I started coming up with all these ideas, and I was looking up to see where can I find the box where I can be putting all these ideas. So that's when I ended up coming up with Red Rocks Initiative as a non-profit organization. So where I'm just throwing all my ideas and see who is going to pick A and B so that we can just work it out and see how it works. And I have also to make a quick comment on Praveen. We jumped in Congo as dreamers. So we were all starting business there. And then things started really turning up to be not that good. So one day I met Praveen, and Praveen said, "Hey, Greg, how are things up there?" I said, "Man, things are up and down." I said, "It's Congo." He was like, "How is business there?" I said, "No." Then one day he told me, "Hey, Greg, I'm putting up a red line, so I'm not going to go to Congo anymore." Then I said, "You know what, Praveen? I'm not leaving Congo anymore. I'm going to stay there forever." So we have been really going through this together. Thanks, Praveen. Thanks, Chris, for this.
So good.
I love this. And yeah, finally, if I just say who I am in that term, in this gang, I am referred to as the fearless. And I don't know what to say about that. Fearless in a good way, I would say that I am a designer. I like to experiment. I like to try new things. I think that is really important, that no one actually knows the best. To find out the good answer, we just need to be prototyping. We need to try new methods. We need to say yes to new adventures, as I say, behind Paka. Yeah, cool. And I think that is also one of the reasons why we have started this Our Future talks as well. We cannot be afraid of getting together and meet as people united all over the world and get together and build a big community together, learn from each other. So in that terms, fearless in that terms. So yeah, from that I would like to just start kind of a dialogue in between the people here. And I mean, you, Chris, maybe would want to start in what kind of challenges and dilemmas would you think about first to group to talk about here?
Sure. Well, I'm going to spin this around just a little bit and say the things I think about are the things that Greg and Praveen think about. And they shared with us quite a few, the coexistence between humans and the communities with wildlife and nature being one enormous challenge, one enormous dilemma. And in particular, Praveen and I were speaking about the human density of Rwanda, the highest in all of Africa. And how do you deal with a finite geographic area and try to make it work? What's that balance? So that's kind of the second one. And then one of the things that we've talked about all over the world for geographic regions is looking at extraordinary destinations, but without borders, without thinking politically, thinking about a destination bigger than ourselves, but then how do we collaborate across the borders? Then the fourth thing, which is more about, you know, the video is just incredible that we're looking at right now. The fourth key thing that we've been thinking about is really what Greg has manifested with Red Rocks Initiative, which is resilience by design, making a resilient community. So these are four kind of areas that we've been thinking about in context to this talk. Maybe Greg, Praveen, if there's one in particular you would suggest we begin with, we'll defer to you, and then we'll have the other panelists start to comment on some of these things or some of the dilemmas you pose. So Greg or Praveen, is there anyone that particularly strikes your fancy to kick off the dialogue?
Praveen, are you going to go with this, or I can just come up with something?
Why don't you come up with something, Greg? What bothers you most? What do you feel will be one of our biggest challenges?
I think our biggest challenge now is we are all coming up with all these ideas and vision. So what I'm really looking up is how can we collaborate with us? How can we build this collaboration between people who are more interested in this? And from the point you also mentioned, how can we encourage our clients, like the way how they come in, they build the schools, they give out like books and everything. How can we build this kind of collaboration between our clients and us to have like regular workshops so that we can address the conservation, the tourism, and the community development to the guests that are visiting us?
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, who would like to start? I don't want to be the one that is talking all the time. I think it would be nice to hear you. Maybe, Milena, I would like you to start.
Oh boy. Why me?
Because you were so into it, that's why.
And behavior.
Yeah, behavior, exactly.
You know, okay, so I'll take a behavioral spin, and I'll start with the framing that I find myself frequently using when we discuss how can we make radical transitions to new ways of doing tourism, which is now frequently placed on the table as an issue, but we wonder how to do that. And one of the maybe the benefits of the situation that we are in, of this crisis, is that while of course it has brought a lot of suffering and a lot of difficulties for all of us on very human, on business and societal level, it has changed our minds and has prepared our minds for radical change of models. So some of the things that we have talked about in sustainable tourism, about when it comes to the interaction between a traveler and a local community, the interaction between conservation and business, which Pradeep mentioned earlier, we have been dancing around these issues, but we knew that the system was working as it was, and it was very, very difficult to make radical changes, which we all knew were needed. Now, because of this disruption, there seems to be a readiness to accept the fact that there's space for great innovation and for radical shifts. So I think that some of these complex issues, which we knew were difficult to change just a year ago, I think now we have an opportunity to literally sit at the white piece of paper, design them, shape them into what we really think they should be, and try to proactively push them now in this space where things are not brought back together. So to me, that's the big, a long way of saying that the really great behavioral benefit of what we're seeing now is that actually there is an opportunity to do some of these things which we haven't been able to in the last years.
So quick question on that. So Greg had said maybe we can do workshops or something. So then the communities where the impact, where we're looking to seek the impact, become the innovators then, and start suggesting new ways of doing it, but on their terms.
Absolutely. That's one of the things. I mean, first that there is a lot of imagination and knowledge in the communities themselves. Frequently, that knowledge and imagination needs to be mixed a little bit with outsiders' point of view, because one of the barriers that exists in such situations is that local people, because that's part of their everyday living, do not see the beauty of some of these basic charms that all of us now are experiencing through the camera there, and all of us are fascinated, but these are the things that shape everyday realities for them. So very often they might not be able to spot these small things which are common for them, but actually are the carriage of beauty and spirit that fascinates us. So that's why maybe that mix between the local creativity and the local passion with an outsider's point of view is probably the right way to create these maybe mini labs and mini creativity workshops or labs really that allow us to really recreate some of the models that we have been using in the past.
Yeah. I've actually got a very practical example of, what Milena is describing, just in terms of when we were looking at some of the initiatives that you guys are working on, Greg. One of the initiatives that completely stood out for me is the banana leaves. It's the bags that are made out of the banana leaves, the compost bags. I think that is such a fantastic innovation. And I mean, I don't know how those are currently being sold at the moment, but it would be really, really great for the community to be able to put those products on Etsy, for example. As someone who's a gardener, I know that those types of products would absolutely sell with gardeners all over the world. And so it's connecting the community with the Etsy platform. They've already got the bags. Etsy already exists. It's really not a difficult thing to do, right?
Daniel, why don't you just briefly mention the original intent of Our Future and how we were going to apply it in person? Because Milena's ideas and what Paka just built on, it will eventually manifest itself once restrictions lift. So maybe you can share.
Can you not elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, I have other things in my mind. But I can say what I thought about, like, because in all of this, we are talking about another point that we talked about, like resilience by design. As I am a designer, I think it is very important, as I said before, like new ways of thinking around new ways of doing things. And that is a must everywhere. We cannot see tourism as one phenomena that is the same everywhere. We just need to adapt to the local contexts everywhere. And it is nothing that we should take for granted. That why should we sometimes allow tourism, and is that actually something that we have as a right as people? I think it is something that we are in if we talk about sustainable, you talk about sustainable tourism. If we talk about sustainable development and the situation we are all in, and Agenda 2030 and everything, we need to not only talk about sustainable development. It's fine enough, of course, but it's kind of a promise to talk about sustainable development, that we are doing something, we're doing the right thing, but we never know exactly what is the right thing to do. We need to be transforming things for real. We need to try things that we have not really imagined yet so far. And that is the situation we are in. If we talk about the Paris Agreement, for example, we need to actually lower the climate impact 10 to 15% every year from now. That is quite, mind-provoking if we just. But here we are in a society where when I see this society, it's like everything about the localness and the local culture, and that is what it always should be about. When I go to places, I would like to get into I want to be a temporary local, as we refer to sometimes. And I have never been so, when I see these pictures from there, I'm not really a smoker, but when I saw the guy smoking before, I was like, hey, I want to do that. So we need to get the storytelling out there. We need to tell the stories, the real stories. And this is one part of that, just making this kind of like diving into to places like this. Now you can elaborate on what you want.
I was just going to say, Greg, your idea to have workshops, as you know, one of the key things is that doing this in person on the ground with the community and co-creating and co-divine, to Milena's point, co-creating and defining visions. That's how it's going to ultimately happen. This is our interim solution. It's to get the dialogue started and to show the rest that we're ready to share the spirit of generosity. And I loved your comment, Milena, about the carriage of beauty and spirit. I'm gonna borrow that with your permission, I hope.
So I've actually got a question for Asta, right? So you mentioned obviously you're in Iceland, you're working with the Iceland Tourism Board. One of the gaps currently, one of the very big gaps as far as African tourism currently is concerned, is our lack of focus on domestic tourism and regional tourism over the years. So Rwanda is a small country, Iceland is a small country. How would you advise the guys to piggyback off of domestic and regional travelers? And in line, obviously, with the point that you've just raised as well, Daniel, around the climate impact. It's obviously better for the climate if more people are traveling domestically. It's better for the gorillas because then we're diversifying our product. I'm very curious to hear what Asta has to say in terms of, how you guys would approach something like this in Iceland.
Mm-hmm. Really good question. And actually just this morning, we had this really big workshop with over 100 companies and 200 participants in the whole, where we were discussing exactly this, because domestic tourism in Iceland has never been something that anyone relies on. I mean, it's just good to have them, but we are not, focusing on that, and we are not in our product development thinking about the Icelandic tourists or travelers. Last summer, we were forced to do it because we had no other choices. And I have been telling, like, for the last 4 or 5 years, you should always focus on your local market to get them to understand you. I mean, we are not many, we are really few. In Iceland, we are 350,000 inhabitants, and when tourism and traveling was allowed, we had about 2 million guests per year. So the guests were so many more than the inhabitants were. But now we have to rethink things, and we need really much to focus on how to bring value from fewer tourists, of course, but with greater impact on the society that we are building up and so on. And this morning, actually, we were focusing a lot on different scenarios. Because there is no way of doing plans like we do in an Excel sheet when we are planning for something that we don't know what is going to happen next. So what we were looking into were more like of a future scenarios. If we try to work on this scenario, then this will happen, and if not, then this scenario will come to life, and so on and so on. And then we were discussing what it was that we really wanted, what our strength was, and not to because we are always so keen on focusing on our weaknesses and what we are trying to do better, but we forget about you know, to keep our strengths and our competitiveness higher. So I think there is a lot of projects and a lot of thinking. We need to do our homework now and focus on the domestic and local tourism, because that can that can help us in all the development and choosing in what we really want when everything starts to get going again.
I think this is also like when you talk about the future scenarios, on actually dare to make the future scenarios, like look into the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. And especially now we are also looking into, like, of course, resilience of tourism during a nature disaster and things like that. That I read this fantastic report from the World Bank. That I think it is something that if you in different, like as a hotel, you always have a safety plan, and you know all the staff know how to act if it starts a fire. But what happens? How will you act in different scenarios? And then be kind of prepared for different scenarios. You can never be completely prepared, but that is actually bringing people together and start to talk about how to act, not only one, but all of us together. Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things when we talk about this is also how, because you were saying resilience by design. So I think one of the big questions that we have now is how do we, in the longer term, plan and organize tourism for long-term resilience, not just for tourism, but tourism as a resource to also do it for local communities. And I was quite fascinated and inspired by reading about how the revenue from the protected areas in Rwanda, 5% of that is then reinvested in a community fund and dispersed to different local projects, including educational activities, which I think this is really an example that we need to take to heart in a lot of different places. Like, how do we actually create tourism that quite explicitly and quite directly actually give back to local communities in that sense? And we can use that also in how we build up long-term resilience for funds that, you know, are in place for natural disasters, as you say, or pandemic disasters is the one that we're in the middle of right now. That goes with tourism taxes, but I think just thinking in terms of access to national parks and how we can create just a percentage of that revenue, we can use that to preserve nature or cultural heritage, or invest in, you know, the education of our local population.
I would like to have hear again from maybe Praveen or Greg, and your thoughts. Praveen, maybe you could say something.
Thank you, Daniel. Certainly one of the things that is interesting about guerrilla tourism, which is important to share with other people, is that it is a very successful model, and so far has been a sustainable model because of the controls. As we said, there's about 1,000 gorillas that remain, 1,060 between these gorilla parks, and about half the gorillas are habituated and half of them are wild. So for the habituated gorilla groups, in Rwanda, it's about 11 or 12 groups at the moment. You have to pay a very high value, especially for an international tourist, and a low value if you're a resident of Rwanda, and a nominal value if you're Rwandese. And each gorilla family sees 8 humans a day for 1 hour under controlled conditions. So that already is a way of trying to make sure that the gorillas survive. They're not stressed, they don't get disease, and they're there alive for the next day. And secondly, as we discussed, the revenue sharing is an important part of it. And these sort of models, again, some of you have picked up, I think are important to look elsewhere in the world, because you can have, as you know, one day very low tourism that doesn't have too much negative impact, and the next day you can get situations like Barcelona or Venice, which completely get out of control. And I think it's very important for us in different parts of the world to already plan for that, so that you at some point have to start controlling numbers, their impact, what is the impact of the footprint, how do you make sure that they give enough back to the communities, to the region they're going, to provide the support to take measures against the negative stuff they might create. Because that, of course, is another sad truth, that as human beings travel, they do bring negative impact with them. and controlling that, reducing that is important, whether it's in their social behavior and interaction, whether it's in their environmental aspect. So the gorilla tourism model has been seen to be one of the most successful models. Whereas, for example, tiger tourism and tiger conservation is less successful because it's remained low value, which is good in some ways. The cost of seeing a tiger is much lower than seeing a gorilla, but the amount of money brought in from tiger tourism and the amount of reinvestment of that back into the national parks and people around is limited. So that's certainly, I think, an important takeaway from Northern Rwanda. It's this tiny micro area which has produced something worthwhile in common with the other gorilla parks.
I wonder, following up on that, if coming out of COVID-19 has somehow at least made us as sort of the general traveler population more keenly aware that the fact that you can travel somewhere for a holiday to experience the world, and that it's a privilege, and that you have to both appreciate that privilege, but that it also entails certain responsibilities to travel to different places and to give back to those. It's a question for all of us. I don't know. What do you think? Is COVID going to increase that mindset with travelers?
I hope so. I think more sharing with people you visit and countries you visit, rather than just dumping on them or expecting them to provide what you want or expecting them to be like you are, and more humility and more understanding of the negative consequences that you can create. I hope COVID will help people think about this.
You know, it's interesting. If you look at the airlines, they're changing the rules right now in the midst of this, behavioral changes. And Signa, you and I have talked about this a bit. And the notion of privilege versus right, you know, it's not a right to be able to travel and visit a destination. It's a privilege. With privilege comes responsibility. Destinations now, should they choose to do this, are now in the driver's seat to shift the paradigm of who defines the rules. If you're coming into my house, I'm going to kindly, diplomatically suggest that you take your shoes off at the door. This is a behavioral thing, right? I had to learn it when I came to Sweden. In America, I never did that. I just walked into the house with my shoes on. I learned it because I was a guest here in Sweden. Destinations can now do the same. They can now change the rules. They have permission because of a global pandemic, a crisis. So if you had the chance, Rwanda, to change the rules, what rules might be changed? Could we change the thinking into more of a regenerative future? If you visit Rwanda, there's going to be some specific contributions you as a guest need to make when you come here. Just an idea.
While you were talking, I was actually following the Facebook live broadcast, and I said to our audience if they have any questions. So we have two questions here. One of them is, I like this kind of question. It's like, do you believe virtual reality tourism and online tourism will be growing? I mean, this is a way kind of an online tourism that we are doing right now. We are kind of in Rwanda. Of course, we want to taste and experience and feel with all senses. I'm not sure how to answer that. Maybe Signe, you used to have clever thoughts on this.
I think, well, I mean, there's no doubt that technology and the use of technology in travel plans will be growing, because we've become just accustomed to having access to actually seeing virtually or digitally wherever we're going. I don't think it will replace, which is the question that I get quite often also, will it replace actual, travel? I don't think so, but I think we'll be using it actively in our probing, in our planning. As a female traveler, you'll be seeing whatever you can see online in terms of a place that you'll live on Airbnb. You'll expect to be able to go through a virtual tour somehow, just to feel safer about it. Just like we did in the old days, we went to Google Maps, but now we can maybe get a live virtual tour instead. So I think it will become sort of more an integrated part of our travel planning and also our travel inspiration. But I don't think it will replace the actual traveling. I don't know if you have any other plans. Maybe
I think it actually also comes to another question here as well, how coronavirus affected future plans for tourism. I think that is maybe a little bit going hand in hand here, because as I say, I think we are so much more connected today, and you expect more to plan more. You expect to see more. Sometimes you could even go into a 3D model of the hotel room where you will stay, and that is something maybe not the standard today, but maybe that will become the standard. I know how we can actually prepare people to act in a responsible way. Things like that we actually can use it in a good way as well. I was showing you before today another project that we are working with augmented reality to get people into be joining urban planning processes, for example, how you could get people to come up with their own ideas on this is how we would like to develop our streets, our cities and such. I mean, there are a lot of promises in there, of course. Yeah.
I mean, I think as far as African tourism, African communities, African people are concerned, like VR as a technology is very advanced. There's so many other avenues, there's different platforms, there's different tools that are readily available now, that are relatively inaccessible, that are relatively inexpensive, that we need to start fusing into our tourism products and offerings and our community products and offerings. The crafts that you guys have there, Greg, are really, really beautiful. They need to be online. You guys need to be shipping those all over the continent, all over the world. The gentleman who was smoking just now, I think he would do so great with a YouTube channel where he just, teaches us what goes into his pipe, teaches us what is in that little thing that he was drinking just now. I'm very curious to know what that was. But really, I think the question around VR is a great one. But in the African context, I think a lot of the time African people feel that we're out of touch a little bit with technology. You have to have all these skills, you have to have all this money. But I want to encourage community members, I want to encourage tour operators on the continent, I want to encourage the tourism industry on the continent to look at the low-lying fruit as far as technology and digital innovations are concerned, because there really, really is a lot now that we can leverage off of to grow our communities, to earn income, to augment our tourism income. Right now, obviously, we don't have international travelers. So there really is great opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, I got another, just before I will let Greg in here again. I think it's interesting. I got one from David here. I think the other key impact of COVID is that it has caused DMOs to reassess their role and function and their accountability to their local citizens. And this is a good thing. And I couldn't agree more. And that is something that we will see here again. I mean, we are talking about what is the drivers for tourism. And we want the tourism to be a tool for benefiting the local life. And we also want local preservation of local traditions and the culture and nature. And to celebrate that, I would like to get Greg in here again and actually experience the amazing cultural assets you have in Rwanda. It is just mind-blowing. And by saying that, also, Austa, can you put that on big screen so we'll see more from that?
Of course.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks very much, everybody that is listening to us as we wrap up right now. Even before we do the closing up, we would like to have like a very quick traditional dance. And I have what Nomad did. Thanks for encouraging us and thanks for getting really interested in what we are doing. This is an interesting Gitaramo event that has really been going on, and we have been waiting for this for a long time. So we can't wait to see this happening again in any country around the world. So we are just looking forward, and we are getting on the floor to get our dance going on as we wrap up, and we will finally have like the last 5 minutes to have like a closing word from Chris, Greg, and Daniel as we wrap up. So let's have the dance going on.
ba mukerarugendo badasiba gusura bagasiga amadovize muze tuhasure turi abanyarwanda we urura barwera ni igihugu cy'u Rwanda muze tugiture turi abanyarwanda we dufite ibirunga karisimbi muhabura sadinyiriya aya ni agahinga muze tuhature turi abanyarwanda we urura barwera we urura barwera ni igihugu cy'u Rwanda muze tugiture turi abanyarwanda we dufite imirambi imisozi n'ibibaya imigezi iriya irimo gutemba mukungu iriya turahataha muze tuhature turi abanyarwanda we urura barwera we urura barwera ni igihugu cy'u Rwanda muze tuhature turi abanyarwanda dufite ibirunga karisimbi muhabura sadinyiriya aya ni agahinga hari iwacu ni mu birunga muze tuhasure turi abanyarwanda we urura barwera we urura barwera ni igihugu cy'u Rwanda muze tugiture turi abanyarwanda we tuvuze ibyiza bitatse u Rwanda bwakwira bugacya Rwanda uratatswe hatatswe na rurema muze tuhature turi abanyarwanda urura barwera kandi yayanyera babishaka we kandi yayanayonera abantu beza we yajya kanikanera babishaka we yagera mu bishimbi iranyerera ntiyana we iranyerera 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 inyamanza iranyerera ntiyana we yagera mu bishimbi iranyerera ntiyana we yanyera mu ngano iranyerera ntiyana we.
Thanks very much for everybody, and thanks for really being into our evening Gitaram that we have been hosting this evening. I would like to really wrap up with our dancing before I hand over the microphone to Chris and Daniel, who are going to say the last word about this. I would like to call upon all the wishes. It says we, in our organization, we have a slogan which says, great visions needs great partners. So we would really like to call upon anyone who would like really to partner with us, link up with us, and see how we can get our vision really growing up, even up to South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and other countries. Thanks, Chris. And I hand over the microphone to Chris and Daniel to close up the event. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And on behalf of all of us, I hope that you'll extend our thanks to all of the community members there who went out of the way to give us a little love and light in the middle of this dark period the globe's in right now. It was just incredible. Got goosebumps. I wanted to be there dancing. It was just super. So, clearly, 90 minutes is insufficient to do a deep dive into the real dialogue and, questions about the dilemmas and such. So we want to make sure that in this process, which we view as kind of the beginning, that we try to collect from the community, from Praveen, from you, and all of the community members with whom you work. We want to hear the questions, the ideas, the challenges, ideas for partnering and collaborating. And if you can help us collect those and share those with this team, we'll come back and just continue to offer thoughts and reflections based on what we're hearing and seeing. So, yeah,
I mean, for me, this has been, we are approaching exactly what we want to do with our future. And you have helped us doing that. Thank you for that, Greg. this has been so amazing, and I cannot wait doing it there again together with you on the ground, dancing and learning everything about your culture and the instruments and all of that. We will, as I said before, we will post all of this material. I think this has been just setting a great standard that we can continue with. And just to say, the next phase, I think we might land in Greece next time.
We're going to Greece next, so we'll be able to soon share the specific destination. But yeah, the idea is just to continue to pop in like Google Earth, hear from the community, learn, share, reciprocate in terms of ideas, and like you just said, Greg, and it was a great summary. You know, how do we do partnerships and stuff? Great work, tech team.
Yeah.
Woo! Great stuff. But extending partnerships, you know, if we're offering that up back and forth, then we're going to grow and we can move to that regenerative future we all seek. Any final thoughts from Praveen, from Greg, and our panelists?
No, just to say thank you. I think it's a great initiative, and I think it's very important we do share new ideas, as a number of the panelists have said, in this post-COVID age, to try and rebalance the world and do our bit in doing that, not just wait for other people to do that. How can each of us, as private sector people, as nonprofit people like Greg, as thought leaders, as clients, how do we make sure that we are more humble in our approach in the world and more sensitive about all that we do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I would also like to reach out to everyone that are watching here live, and also everyone that will watch this later on, that this our future concept, you're welcome to contact us. And if you would like to do the similar thing and join this great community, because that is actually what we are doing. We are creating a community. We are creating a community between communities. Like we started in Iceland, now we are adding Rwanda to it. We are adding Greece. We are adding, together we are united globally. And I think it is so important to have this kind of open source kind of like learning platforms, because we are never fully learned. I heard this quote that there are no omniscient experts, but what we need is curious specialists. I think that is something we need to, and we need to be more involving in the processes and work as a collective with efforts. Exactly what you are doing there, Greg. So I really admire what you're doing there. It is fantastic to see. And maybe Pekka, Asta, and you say something.
Yeah, I will just agree with what you're saying. This has been really, a learning curve to participate and learn what the issues are over there. Although we are really, not alike, we are alike. So that is a really good takeaway from this. Our issues are in a similar way. So thanks.
I also want to say that it's extremely inspiring to learn and to hear what has been happening in this community. And I think that the power of what we're doing now actually lies in connecting with each other, to inspire each other to think bold, because we have a window of opportunity to do that. And physically, we are isolated in different parts of the world, but on a human level, we are connected. And through our joint creativity, with our joint inspiration that we share, I think we can inspire each other to really take that proactive and bold stance and at setting new norms of behavior. Where destinations and local businesses are bolder in setting the rules, as Chris pointed out, and travelers are humble and more respectful when they visit these places. So I hope that this is the inspiration that is one of the outputs of what we're doing here.
No, an absolutely inspirational session, and really view into communities on the ground in Rwanda it really is truly special, especially in this climate that we're in. And, you know, when I posted this event on Facebook, the first question that came up was, you know, how can young South Africans get to Rwanda? What do we do when we're in Rwanda? So I really am glad that we've had this session, as it opens up really, really important and fruitful discussion within the continent ourselves, amongst young people who've never had an opportunity to travel our own continent before. And so it is a very, very dynamic and very interesting time. And thank you so much, Greg, and the community members for hosting us today. We've learned so much. Love the instruments, love the drums. It was really, really great. I really wish we could have done this in person. Thank you, everyone.
Great stuff. Signe, any last thoughts?
It's difficult to add something clever after so many clever people. No, but thank you so much for inviting us into your work, Greg. And I think it's very inspiring. And I also think that it's important to have these discussions, both in terms of the as you're saying, Paka, the awareness of travelers in terms of our roles and responsibilities when we travel, but also the new roles of destinations and how we plan and structure tourism to better contribute really to local communities. So important discussions to be had.
Excellent. Well, with that, Greg and Praveen first, and the communities that you serve, thank you for being a part of this and helping to make it happen. To our other thinkers who contributed to this, thank you for investing the time to study up on Rwanda and just be a part of the dialogue. And then to everyone listening through the Facebook streaming, thanks for being present. And to the degree that you feel comfortable doing so, we highly encourage you to share the program, talk about it, continue to provide feedback, send us questions, and we'll just continue down this path. So with that.
Yeah, with that, I think we will start
Daniel.
up. We will continue the Igitaramo here from Malmö, and join you for that. And I think the Igitaramo will just go on all over the world for everyone that has been listening here now, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.